Started. So welcome to New York City Department of Education's presentation, and you're going to hear quite a few things. You're going to hear a little bit about the initiative, how it started. You're going to hear a lot about our learnings and how we've shifted things from the beginning to now, but also the aspirations that we have. And hopefully this will tie in the theme around how do we at the NYC DOE think about equitable CS pathways, how are we actually doing it, and also what are we aspiring to in the future.
And so thinking about this, again, welcome everybody, and we appreciate your patience. Just a quick introductions. My name is Tanisha Mitchell. I'm the Senior Director of School Support Strategy, working within the Computer Science Education team for New York City Department of Education. And next to me is
Ron Summers, Executive Director of CS Education. I've been here in the Department of Education for almost 17 years. Done a little everything from being a teacher, which I enjoyed every single moment of it, to working with Tunisia and the rest of the amazing CS Education team around how do we take a subject area that was so new and didn't necessarily have structure and actually now support it with CS standards, buy-in, and everything else connected to it.
So during this session, you're going to have a chance to understand a little bit more of what we do here on the Computer Science Education team within the New York City Department of Education. We have an amazing team that creates a lot of great resources to support our schools and our students in receiving access to CS. And so some of these resources would be within the deck, but also key resources are towards the right, which is our website. So if you want to learn more about our work and what we do and how we do it, you can find it there. And if you're interested in receiving more educational resources or bringing computer science to your schools and districts, you can also utilize the Blueprint link. And so thinking about our work, we're just going to go straight into it and help you understand a little bit more of what we're doing in the Department of Education. We have our new Chancellor, Chancellor David Banks, and with our Chancellor, we are thinking about how we are actualizing our North Star. Our North Star being centering our students and making sure that they are prepared on a pathway for a rewarding career. And so when we're thinking about that, we see computer science as a cornerstone. How can we make sure to provide the concepts and practices to help our students utilize computational thinking to not only learn about how to utilize technology, but to be empowered to utilize technology to solve problems to support our communities. And so within this work in the DOE, we're working with our public schools to ensure that they have the tools and resources to move that work forward. Thinking about these pieces, a little bit about also our mayor. In connection with the DOE, it takes a whole village, right? And so in order for us to move this work, we're doing it on the school system, but it's also investment within the entire government in thinking about how we actualizing these pathways to ensure that our students receive the resources they need to have not only the CS instruction, but to build that pipeline to make sure that we are providing pathways post-secondary into careers in CS. And at least if they're not going to be a programmer, they know how to think like one, right? And how to utilize those concepts and practices throughout their daily lives. Because as we know, whether we are in New York City or anywhere else in the world, we use these pieces every single day. And with our mayor, is committed to making sure that we're providing these concepts and practices to our students so they too can be able to utilize it for themselves. So a little bit more about our connected pathways. We're going to talk about CS for all and computer science education, but within computer science education, there's also a larger scope in thinking about how we connect these 21st century skills and making sure that the rigorous instruction we're doing in the classroom also meets past the classroom, right? And so within the scope that we're talking about today, it's all about making sure that we're empowering our teachers and our schools in providing CS instruction, but also empowering them to think about post the classroom, right? How do we connect this to real world experiences to ensure that our students understand not only how to think about computer science, but how to apply it, right? And so in connection to the work that we're doing, along our team and our department, we're also exploring what it means for work-based learning opportunities. How can we support our students in actualizing, not in the classroom, but also can it show up in their transcripts, right? And how does it look like when they're passing post K-12? So when they are past K-12, they understand the opportunities and they are exposed to the different opportunities that computer science can bring. And so today we're going to just talk a little bit more about our history, the work that we do, as well as how we connect that to real world and how you can bring that to your space as well.
And this is a perfect segue, Tunisia, into getting into the history. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with NYC DOE CS4All initiative, we were founded in year 2015 with the focus on making sure that every single New York City public school student has access to computer science. We emphasize our students who identify as female, our Black and Latinx students as a core demographic group for our work. As we have grown the work and learned from the early lessons, we've also made sure there's an emphasis on this idea, which is now part of our values, which is we will make sure that our programming and our strategy is focused on early exposure to CS. We will make sure that our strategy and the way that we think about programming is connected to increasing access to computer science and CT, but also that belonging that is welcoming and affirming is a core cornerstone of our work. Just learning CS or implementing CS is not enough. We need to make sure that our teachers, our administrators, our guidance counselors, our district leaders are thinking very hard about how am I going to make sure that the classroom is a welcoming space where that is not put on the student to create, but for us as educators to make sure that is happening. You will also see that our initiative is 10 years. And in the first 5 years, it was about figuring out what discovery and programming is. We happen to have an amazing team here. And the team was able to think about, one, what does CS education look like when it comes to integration and standalone courses? What does it look like when we think about engaging our administrators, engaging our guidance counselors, engaging our district leaders? And you could think of that first 5 years as a time of pure innovation, where we were figuring out how to do it at scale. We have 1.1 million students in New York City public schools. We have 1,800 schools. So we have to think about that from the beginning. As we went through year 6 and 7, we really started thinking about how are we going to operationalize this from an infrastructure standpoint so that every student has access to CS and CT, something that we have been calling durable skills, because it's everyone's right to have computer science education and computational thinking experiences. You will see as we round out the initiative, we're thinking very hard about how do those foundational durable skills scale to every single student within 4 experiences, which we call K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. And how do we also build a runway so career-connected pathways can shine bright? You'll see at the bottom of this slide, our approaches are called out. We believe that quality instruction and implementation, real thoughtful culture building, and planning to reach for all are all extremely important parts of honoring our mission, making sure that every student has access to computer science. By high school graduation, and this is the connection that I'm making to Tunisia's point earlier, we have to make sure that our students have real skills. We have to make sure that the instruction that's happening in the classroom can translate into actual on-the-job or outside of the classroom experiences that a kid can say, yeah, I like to code. Or you know what? I can't stand this thing called coding, but I'm going to open up my skateboard business. And I now know how to speak the language of code so that I can have the proper e-commerce site that works for the people who are going to shop on my site. So just again, to reiterate our goal, we want to make sure that every student within the grade bands of K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 have a CS experience. That is 4 core CS experiences that we believe in should happen by the time they graduate from high school.
And so thinking about that, making sure that our students have what they need to understand computer science, be exposed to computer science, and utilize computer science to empower themselves on how they want to move forward with this work. We had to think about the lens of that student, right? And so thinking about these pieces, our approach to this work is centering our student first, right? We actually took time to think about what does a K-12 student experience looks like. Right, and so there is a whole document, and we can make sure to share that document with you. But just to give you a taste, when we're thinking about that student, we're really thinking about what is their core experiences with CS, along with just their experience as being a kid, right? These are our future learners. These are our future leaders, right? And we want to make sure that we're thinking about what they are digesting, what would be helpful to learn, and to grow upon their experience in exploring computer science. So as a team, along with the work with the standards, we started to outline how our students will connect with CS. As Ron was saying, K to 2, 2 to 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. We started to really outline those experiences to see, okay, they're exploring here, they're innovating here, and again, moving up to being citizens into this work. Again, always thinking about making sure they have the understanding of those concepts and practices. Our goal is not to make our students programmers. Our goal is to make sure they are aware of what CS is, aware on how to harness the work, and aware of the opportunities that are connected, because they can utilize that to move their work forward past graduation, right? So when we're thinking about this work, it's all about making sure that our students have the tools necessary to create a platform for themselves, utilizing computer science and computational thinking. From there, after understanding what that experience looks like for students, we started thinking about what our students need, right? And that's when we get into the core of our school. Our team with computer science education started to create resources and strategies to support school teams and making sure that they have the tools and resources they need to actually build the work. Because as we know, it takes a village, right? It takes a village at home, and it also takes a village in a school to move this. And so for us in the Department of Education, we made sure that we are providing resources for our school building leaders. That way admins and administrative point of context can be able to create a vision around the work, connect that to their school priorities, their district priorities, and help them understand how do they support their team and making sure their students have access. Just as we're working with the admins, we're also working with the teachers, right? No matter if they have experience with computer science or if they've done computer science in the past, we take wherever the teachers are and we help bring them to where they can go and bring it into their classroom. So we offer PL trainings to our teachers at various capacities, thinking about that vision that we're working with the admin to ensure that they have the necessary information to translate that into the classroom. Now, just as we're working with our teachers, we also thinking about how we can support them with content learning and pedagogy, because we know that computer science is a new subject area in the school, right? And so thinking about those pieces, we want to make sure that we provided infrastructures to help grow teachers in learning computer science. So teachers starting with us may start in one content area, but they're always welcome back. They can learn another content area, right? Maybe one day, 1 year, they're focusing on web programming. Next year, they're focusing on robotics. Maybe they want to focus on data and data science, right? And thinking about these different structures, we make sure that we provide different experiences of implementation to support teachers in bringing that vision to life in the classroom. Along with that, we also help our teachers and think about how we sustain and scale this work and thinking about sequences, right? And so understanding that teachers already have a lot on their plate, we want to kind of make it easier for them. And so they don't have to create the content. They're really more thinking about, okay, this is what CS, I'm learning about CS just as a learner in my classroom. And now as a pedagogue, how do I translate this to meet my students' needs? Along with these pieces towards the bottom, you're going to notice that we have computer science and digital fluency standards. For us, it has been imperative in understanding not only how to provide training to our teachers and the schools on what computer science is, but also how can we empower them to also see the connection to those standards and making sure that we are upgrading our curriculum to connect and make those connections to the standards to support our teachers and understanding where it fits. And so this is just a little taste of some of the work that we do to make sure that, again, we're centering our students and providing an ecosystem of resources and structures to support the CS school team at these schools in providing access to our students. Now, along with our support throughout the school year, we also are centered in data. Data is a huge piece on our work and honestly a huge piece of helping schools in moving forward and supporting their students. We know training is one thing, making sure schools are empowered and understand how to bring CS instruction to classroom. But we also know, just as in any subject area, we need to measure progress. The computer science education team has developed a CS access rating system that allows us to help districts and schools understand what it truly means to achieve CS for all students. With this access rating, we go deeper into understanding who in that school is receiving access to computer science. Is it just the first grade band? Is it the second grade band? Is it all of our students? And then really thinking about more in depth, who are the demographic of those students? So we can create a tailored plan in that school, in that district, to ensure that every student in that school actually receives that access. A little bit more of what that looks like. When we're thinking about the CS access rating, we're thinking about the saturation. So again, taking a deep dive of the percentage of the students in that school who has an experience with computer science. A lot of this information we gather through STARS, a system that we utilize within the New York City Department of Education that allows us to identify and program what is happening with our students. From STARS, we're able to see which students are receiving computer science, but we also break it down to that equity piece. We start thinking about who amongst our students are receiving that access, right? And so thinking about our students who identify as females, as males, our students who are Black and Latinx, thinking about who in that classroom is receiving access, what is the likelihood of them receiving that access, and how do we make sure to create a plan for that access? All together, we connect that to our ratings that you see below. So all of our schools may be at different points in their implementation. Some are just starting, so they might be beginning. Some are thinking about how they advance past one grade band, right? So they might be progressing. All in all, we work with our schools to help them see where they are in that student access to make sure that all of our schools have a plan for achieving CS for all of our students.
And now we'll get into a preview of what it looks like to operationalize the concepts that we've talked about, from what does the data say and how are we using the data to move the work? How do we think about our values of exposure, access, and belonging, our approaches of implementation, culture building, and planning? How does that all gel together to actually support the entire system? You'll see the approaches and values are here in the team on the top, but you also see how we're using data, our support strategy, and learning to actually round it out. So CS Access data is a core part of helping a school see where they are and pinpoint where they want to go. We have data that we use internally so that we can actually review where schools are, add new data checkpoints to it, so that any member of our team could be able to say either, I know where PS 123 is, I know where teacher A is, or I know where district B is, and use that to be able to move the work. That connects to our K-12 programming, which I'll preview to you in a second, because our programming is designed to help a school who's at the beginning, who's at the middle, and also who is achieving for all, be able to maintain that. And then last but not least, there's just the learning. We are so thankful that the state of New York, in collaboration with other districts throughout the state, was able to come together to build the New York State Digital Fluency and CS standards. That is a core cornerstone of our work. Our K-12 experience that Tunisia showed you is built based on that. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are supporting what the state has said is the high expectation for all schools, and that shows up in our work. We also make sure that student surveys and assessments are happening, because again, we can roll out anything that we want, but we need to know what's happening on the ground. Now, our portfolio has evolved over time. We have introductory offerings, which are very clear that for a principal who's bringing CS into their school for the first time, this is what you can start with. And if you use that as your base, you can actually reach CS for all, which again is defined as every student by the end of the grade band receiving computer science or computational thinking experience, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. We also have intermediate plus pathways for the school who has already gotten started, but wants to go deeper. And then there's advanced programming. This is the deepest offering that we have, and that's where you're really creating that pathway to those out of the classroom experiences that are a cornerstone of New York City's Pathway Initiative and the work that we do to make sure students are economically ready. And you'll see at the bottom here that 54% of our portfolio is the introductory program, because we know that we need to make sure schools have that entry point. So we really are smart, or we're trying to be smart in making sure our portfolio meets the demand of the moment. Now, this is a very complicated slide, but there's no other way to do this justice. Our team has worked tirelessly to take our portfolio offerings and structure them in a way that a school principal or district leader can understand. So you'll see in the yellow band, that is our introductory offerings. We have them going across all the grade bands. And we're very clear that if you use one of these offerings, you could actually use this to scale out and reach for all across your grade bands. We're very clear that the intermediate offerings are your next step to that deeper experience, while our intermediate plus, again, are deeper, but they require you to have some infrastructure in place. So this is where the school team is really important, because we don't want schools to automatically jump to APCS, right? We want them to wholeheartedly think about, if I want to have a APCS program, so my kids are getting credentials, what's happening before that? Because equity has to be at the center. We're not CS for some, this is CS for all. And this helps our principals think about that. On the right, which I think is equally as important to our classroom implementation programs, is how we're thinking about school leadership. We make sure that teachers who are ready to actually support their school get the coaching and the support needed to actually lead a school team, to be the advocate for the principal, and to also take the work deeper in our second layer of the work. So they go from CS leads, which is the foundational experience for a teacher leader, and they go further into something called EECS, which is exploring equity in computer science. You should definitely join tomorrow's session that Christy Crawford will be running. It starts at 9:15 a.m. tomorrow morning, and she's going to give you a preview of what that looks like. But that's important because we want our teacher leaders to be versed in equitable practices. Again, this is not about students finding a way to belong. This is about the school putting practices in place so that students belong and feel welcome, and they're affirmed in that space. That's what our EECS teacher leaders do. And this rounds out our portfolio offerings. And I'll end here because I think equity deserves this moment where we're thinking about, how do those practices translate to within every program we offer? If you did a count, there are 15 programs that we offer in New York City public schools. We have equitable foundations happening in every single program. So as a teacher, if you are in our programs, you are going to have an equitable foundation experience where you not only are thinking about, what does it mean to teach CS? What does it mean to teach robotics? What does it mean to think about abstraction? But also, how are you applying equitable practice to that teaching so that our students feel good in that space, have reflections of themselves showing up, but more importantly, we can ground everything that we do in equity as an educator, as a teacher, as a leader, and as a system.
And so thinking about all these pieces, we talked about our history and what we have done, how it's evolved, where we are now, and a little bit more now about where we are headed. Thinking about the collective work of our team, we spent a lot of time exploring what has been helpful for our students to learn computer science, to bring more structures and infrastructures to our CS school teams at our schools and our districts. We want to continue to build upon that and make sure that all of our districts have the level of support that they need to actually provide guidance to their schools in implementing CS. Now, what does that mean? Making sure that we're thinking about the entire CS school team, right? Who is in that building and what resources and support do they need to actually actualize that North Star, and making sure that all students have access to computer science and the opportunities that are involved with being aware and affirmed in that space. Right? So along with building those infrastructures, we have some pipelines to do. And actually, these pipelines are not just with New York City, but it's thinking about New York State and all of the US. Right? How do we make sure that we're developing pipelines for our students and actualizing those pathways so they understand computer science and are ready and empowered to explore that past their experience? In order to do that, we need to build infrastructures both within the K-12 experience as well as post K-12 to ensure that there is a pipeline to support teachers in understanding how to do computer science in that classroom. So we're going to be working very closely with districts and colleges to help us in that effort. Last but not least is making sure that every student has that access. And so we're constantly reiterating and reviewing and refining what is helpful within the school system and making sure that our students have that access. Our school staff are empowered with providing that access to their students and making sure that we're actualizing that in policy and making sure that their practice are set in stone to ensure that CS instruction is being provided to all of our students. And so we'll continue to keep you updated in that effort and also working with you to ensure that our students have that access. Because again, it takes a village, just as it's a village in a school, it is a village within our system to ensure that we are learning from each other how to build those practices in. So a little bit more about the work that we do in DOE as we're moving forward and heading into next steps in our work. We're also thinking about how do we make sure to create those strong plans, not only within the school system, but make sure that we're actualizing them so there are plans in creating strong careers for our students and moving forward. So what does that mean? Making sure that we're helping our schools with those real world skills, those durable skills that Ron was talking about, and ensuring that our students have that access, but ensuring that our school teams understand how to create a pathway and set a vision that's sustainable and scalable so we can create those career connected pathways for our students. Now, a lot of those pieces you might think is high school, but it honestly starts at the beginning, right? It's a K-12 experience. And we really believe wholeheartedly having that strong foundation starting in that elementary space and moving up towards K-12 is really how we're going to move this work forward. So thinking about that strong plan, those head starts, making sure we create a pathway. We're going to make sure that we are working with the system to improve our outcomes and how we are seeing how our students are receiving that access. So we're going to do more deeper dive in our access data, do more deeper dive on what we're providing our students, and more deeper dive of how we're supporting our schools and districts in actualizing those plans. And so with that, we want to say that in this work, we're not the only ones who are doing it. It takes all of us, right? And we know that there has been a pandemic. We had our own challenges still navigating this pandemic on how we support our schools and schools themselves, how they support each other in bringing this work into fruition. One of the things that we also say with our team, if the work isn't happening now, when is it going to happen, right? And so when thinking about this, we're going to continue to work because we know that inequity does not take a day off. And though there are a lot of strides that we have been doing within the community, there's still a lot more to go. And so we're going to continue to push on to make sure that our students have that access. Let's continue to work with each other in understanding practices that meet the needs of our students and the school teams and their districts. And with that, thank you for joining us. We're going to actually have a chance to have a Q&A and learn from each other how we can support each other and making sure that all of our students have access. So thank you for hearing from Rana and Tunisia. From the CS Ed team, let's open up the floor, and please let us know if you have any questions, and also if just things to share that you were inspired, that would be great to lift up with the community.
So Q&A, feel free to throw questions in the chat. We can actually see it now. We could not see it a moment ago, or just, unmute yourself if you can and shoot some questions out. So it looks like we have some questions from Sarah. Sarah, it's great to see you. Well, it's great to hear from you. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to read this out loud, Sarah. Sarah says, so excited about all the fantastic work and growth the NYC DOE team has done over the years, especially with the equity team. You're curious about two things. How does the team think about equity? And then do two, thank you. And with introductory, intermediate, and intermediate plus and advanced, and is the goal for all schools to reach advanced implementation? And so the second question is, can you share a bit more about the choice to call integrated courses introductory? Those are really great questions. I think we can break this up.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. And maybe I can start with two, because this also could be the way that we presented it. The introductory, intermediate plus, and advanced tracks are not connected to a specific implementation type. So for intro, we have standalone and we have integration offerings. The idea is that schools had a very hard time figuring out where to start. So what we tried to do was break that down and think about the way we're designing our coursework, you can say, so that it's for, a new school or a school that's trying to make sure the foundational experience can be scaled out. So that's just the differentiator. Integration is something that we believe should happen from K through 12.
And no matter how they get there, we want to make sure that all of our schools have access, right? And we have different types of schools in the New York City Department of Education. We have some schools that are secondary schools. We have schools that are just elementary, middle school. We work with admins to understand what is the vision of the work in their school, understanding that they know their students best, right? Admins, teachers, they know their students best. We want to make sure to equip them with the tools to help them actualize that in that building. And so there might be different pathways for that school. We have options of what could be available, but we really work with them to understand what their needs are and then match them towards those needs to make sure their students have that access.
And then maybe we could finish off this one. The goal for advanced implementation, we know that every school will not be able to deliver advanced options. We want every school to deliver advanced options, but most folks on this call know what it's like to be in a school, what it's like to have competing priorities that aren't just around computer science. So our portfolio is designed to give them that pathway to get there. Of course, hoping that every school will be able to do advanced coursework, but the reality is, depending on what's happening in the school, from the principal to the AP to the teachers to the mandates that are coming out from the district or the state, things may have to change from year to year. We want every school to make sure they're reaching for all. And if that means it's all intro, that's okay. If that means you have advanced offering, that's okay. But every student should have access to high quality CS instruction so they can be, part of tomorrow's tech economy. All right, we have Phil.
Yes.
Are you too aware that CS was just made a career and technical subject area which would allow schools to fulfill? Yes, we are, because we actually sat in those meetings. So thank you for calling that out so people know that CTE and CS together have been working to make sure that there's pathways for our CTE teachers to be able to provide CS. There's pathways we think about the credentialing of our teachers so they can get certified. That continues to work together. And we're also ironing out a few things as the rollout gets closer and closer. Thank you, Phil.
I see another question from Christopher. Could you share some examples of how this unified vision of equitable CS implementation looks different at different schools? Specifically, what kinds of factors look different at different schools? That's such a great question. And there's so many different ways to answer that. Just thinking even with, let's say, grade bands, right? When we're thinking about elementary schools and how it is structured in elementary, there really isn't like a standalone course time for CS, right? And so we work with schools to really think about how do you integrate CS and think about those concepts and practices so it's infused throughout the school day to help ensure that students have that access. So that's just thinking about from an elementary lens versus, let's say, a high school lens where you could do integration, but there's also multitude of different areas and ways that you can do standalone courses as well. Another way that you can think about is just understanding how to work with students. I know with younger ones, when I was teaching, I did a lot of unplugged first because students are very tactile and they like to work with their hands, right? And there's so many things that you can do, whether it is, building a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and helping them understand that there's an algorithm towards that, right? And then making sure to build up towards the computer and utilizing platforms within the computer to move that work. But along with those pieces, there's just tons of different ways that you can differentiate, knowing who your students are in that classroom, right? So if you have students that in certain classrooms, you have 10 languages all happening, how do you empower those students with those languages, right? And thinking about their cultures and their backgrounds and infusing themselves into CS and network, right? And so that implementation with CS probably will look a little bit different in a different classroom that probably has just students from one area, right? And so I think with CS, there's so many ways that you can explore it. The best place to start is just understanding who your students are and then thinking about what they need, what their interests are, and then connecting CS with it.
And I'll add one more example, which is mix it up, right? We have elementary and we'll say middle. Middle is the best example in 6-8. You have schools who have mixed up integration and standalone offerings to create the sequence that works for them. Like everything that Tanisha said about making it work for your population, for your resources in the school and the capacity of your staff is important. So if in grade 6 is an integrated offering, in grade 7 you're going intermediate with the standalone, that's fine. If instead you want to have a standalone offering in grade 6, which is your for all point, and then you have integrated offerings happening in grade 7 and 8, that's okay. It's about the school team being very creative and being realistic around what are their goals, where are they now, where do they need to get to as a benchmark, and then how are we going to provide the right experience for students?
I see a follow-up question. How do you support families and communities in understanding what the school is doing with CS and participating in setting priorities? Ooh, this is such a big one. And there's so many pieces towards this, and also things that we are going to continue to grow on as well. One of the pieces that we did not share is not only do we think about computer science in the classroom, but we also have additional programs to help our students pass the classroom. So one of our team members, or actually a group of our team members, oversee what we call the Pathfinders program, where students who are in computer science classrooms have the opportunity to take an internship and explore CS outside the classroom, right, and actualize that. So that's just one piece, and just thinking about what does that look like even outside the classroom, but going deeper into what you said with families and community, super huge, right? And so when we actually are working with our schools, we do have different resources that we share out to schools to help them think about how they can communicate this with families. One of the biggest things that we probably all know about is CS Ed Week and all the resources that come into that. We also suggest low lifts for schools, and think about how do you think about computer science and share that with the school community. And so we host events throughout the year to help our schools think about just that. And we definitely leverage CS Ed Week to help have that big push, and just showing that CS is not scary. CS is just another piece of the pie, right? CS is something that we always do. And it's just really thinking about how you have those entrance points. And so whether it be with families or your school community, there's always a step in. One thing, again, to say is just understanding your community at large, right? Understanding who your students are, think about your community. Maybe it is in that morning meeting when you're having a prep, or maybe it is at the end of the day, or maybe it's Chancellor's Day. But there's so many different opportunities where you might be able to find where you actually start with CS. But the biggest piece is just making sure to start. Because once you start, a lot of times students just gravitate towards it and they want to keep doing it, and they will be your advocate as well, right? And so just making sure that you have a place to explore it might be a great place to start.
And I'll take Phil's question. So Phil asked a question about computers and connectivity made available for students. So we have an amazing Department of Instructional Technology who works very hard to provide principals with the access points that they need to support their communities. But this is also something that district leaders and principals enact in many different ways. So it's really important to, one, talk to the principal of the school or the superintendent to see how they're thinking about that access. Because again, our school system is unlike many others. We have 32 plus school districts within New York City public schools. And within every district, there can be anywhere from 10 to 30 schools. So it really comes down to what the region needs and the strategy that superintendent has in place. And we are down to 3.5 minutes for this amazing, buggy, glitchy presentation that we think comes across as authentic, because that's what it is. We're proud to share the work. It's been a while. The community has not been together in this way in quite some time. And thanks to Tom O'Connell and others who are part of CSTA, we have this space. So again, shoot a question if you can. We will answer it. But we only have 3 minutes left before the room shuts down. Anything else on your mind? Thanks, Chris. We appreciate that. Our team, who's sitting a few feet from us, has done so much hard work since 2015, right? They continue to amaze the system and make things happen in the hardest conditions, including COVID-19. All right, I wish we could just turn this camera around and just show them, because they make this all worth it for schools. And
it looks like, thank you, Kevin, for sharing that we have additional questions in the Q&A spot. And then it looks like it's
hi, Leon. We can see you now.
Hi, I was just pointing that out, that I typed the question there because the chat doesn't work for me.
Understood.
Yeah.
So Leon, do you want to just say it? Yeah, because we only have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Sure. The difficulty in bringing CS to everyone is that some kids are struggling with just core subjects. So I wonder how some schools are handling that, especially a high school where you want to give them grades, there's projects, and how do you keep your weaker kids from just failing and being discouraged?
So I'm going to push against you, Leon. In the end, we're educators, right? That's what we do. We don't see the kids necessarily as weaker, and we think about how are we going to coach up that school team to think about the integration of CS. And I think that's the key word, right? A standalone course sometimes can be a really heavy lift on a teacher, on a school for programming. And if we thought integration, connecting to the priorities of the principal, the priorities of the school, the priorities of the teacher, we found success in getting computational thinking to come alive, even when other things need to happen, whether it's, more time in ELA, more time in art, more time in math. And that has been the secret sauce. Now, no, because you are an educator, that is not easy, right? Integration, most people think integration means very little CS and it's easy to do. Integration takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of thought. And it puts a big burden on our teachers to come up with the solution. But that is the best way that we are standing behind when it comes to computational thinking being available to everyone, knowing that competing priorities will always exist.
Thank you for that, Leon. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just as we have 1 minute left, I just want to make sure to lift up. This is just a taste of 2 of us talking with our team. We have other team members who will be doing presentations throughout this event. And so thinking about Saturday at 9:35, we have Lionel, who is going to be leading a K-5 elementary, intro to elementary and CS experience. And so please check that out. That'd be really great, especially for elementary schools. And then Christy Crawford, as we shared earlier, has actually 2 sessions that are happening tomorrow, one at 9:35 and one at 11:15. At 9:35 is exploring culturally responsive teaching in CS. And then at 11:15, it's all about exploring equity in computer science, that other teacher leadership pathway that we were talking about earlier. And so with that, thank you again for joining us. I hope you get to see more of the amazing work that our team does throughout this event. And let's keep moving the work forward and make sure our students have access with CS.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.